Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. We're back.
Good to see you all, and we miss you, and we forge ahead. You know, there's a great saying from a play by Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot. And Godot says, I can't go on. I go on. So here we are. We go on. And with that, we sing. Yom Ze Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Shabbat Menucha. This is Israel's day. This is the day for us to rejoice and be glad in it, the Shabbat. Yom Ze Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Shabbat, Shabbat, Shabbat Menucha. Yom Ze Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Shabbat, Shabbat, Shabbat Menucha. Tzedika Pikudim B'Ma'amad Sinai Shabbat U'Moadim Lishmor B'chol Shanai Taroch Lifanai Shabbat Shabbat Shalom. Yom Ze Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Shabbat, Shabbat, Shabbat Menucha. Yom Ze Yisrael Ora V'Simcha Shabbat, Shabbat, Shabbat Menucha.
Again, Shabbat Shalom. And I'd like to invite Cantor Deborah to bless the Shabbat candles for us.
Ba'ashabbat, Ba'ashabbat, Ba'ashabbat Menucha. Ba'ashabbat, Ba'ashabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Menucha, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu להדליק נר של שבת.
And please join me in the chanting of the Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'yahav ha'uvratzon hinchilanu. Zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh, zeher litziyat mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta, yotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim. V'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. Amen.
L'chaim, l'simcha, L'shalom to your health. Yismechu v'malchutecha. Shomrei Shabbat. We shall rejoice in the Shabbat. The people Israel, that's us. It is incumbent upon us to guard, to keep, to observe, to celebrate Shabbat. Yismechu v'malchutecha shomerei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat yismechu v'malchutecha shomerei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Chazan Ellen, join us from home loudly. Mikadashei Mikadashei Shvi Shabbat Shabbat Yismechu V'malchutecha Shomerei Shabbat Yismechu V'malchutecha Shomerei 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 Shabbat V'korei oneg Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutecha shomerei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat zecher zecher l'maasei v'vi Shabbat zecher zecher l'maasei v'reishit Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutecha shomerei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutecha shomerei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat.
And now I'd like to offer an opening prayer for our service. Creator of the universe, though separated by physical distance, nevertheless we are joined together once again to affirm your presence in our lives. The week of toil and worry has ended. The time of rest and renewal has come. May each new Shabbat find us going from strength to strength, so that through your guiding spirit we may aspire to be worthy of your blessings. Make us conscious of our opportunities for service that you have put within our reach. Help us to use our talents for the benefit of others, so that the lives of many may be made better through the work of our hands. And join me, please, in saying Amen.
Amen. Modim anachnu lach, modim anachnu lach, modim, modim anachnu lach.
Let's join together in singing Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem. Welcome, angels of peace. Thank you, Albert, for playing. Melech Malchei HaMelachim HaKadosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalom Aleichem Malchei HaShabbat Malchei Elyon Melech Malchei HaMelachim HaKadosh Kadosh Baruch Hu. Everyone, Shalom Aleichem, Malchei Hashat, Malchei, Malchei, Malchei Elyon, Melech, מלכי המלכים, הקדוש, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שובו לשלום, מלכי השלום, מלכי עליון, מלך, מלכי המלכים, הקדוש, קדוש ברוך הוא. Everybody, Rabbi. Shalom Alechem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei, Malachei, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
So let us now continue with the Baruch Hu, and followed by the Mariv and then the Shema. Together we chant.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. I'm facing east. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim b'chachma poteach sha'arim ובתבונה משנה עתים ומחליף את הזמנים ומסדר את הכוכבים במשמרותיהם ברקיע כרצונו. ברוך אתה אדוני Hama'ariv Aravim. We praise you, eternal God, creator of the universe, by whose laws the shadows of evening fall and the light of each new day is opened. In wisdom you have established the changes of times and seasons and ordered the ways of the stars in their heavenly courses. You are the creator of heaven and earth, the source of all life. We praise you, eternal God, for the day and its work, and for the night and its rest. And together we join in the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem, Shem Kevod Malichuto, Le'olam Va'ed. We join in Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם emet. And we say Ve'ahavta, and we shall love God, the good,
something other than ourselves, with every beat of our heart, with all our hearts, and with all of our neshama, with all our breath, and with all our souls, and with all our me'odness, with all of our might, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. We shall talk about them, we shall do them, whether we are tired or rested. May this guide the work of our hands. Keep these words in the forefront of your vision. Place them at the doorpost of your house or outside your gate. For these are reminders to do good deeds, do good work, mitzvot, so that we can come a little closer to God and to that by which we call holy. Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am Adonai, your God.
Albert, if you'd be so kind, would like to ask you to accompany Cantor Bard now in singing the evening prayer Hashivenu, may we lie down in peace.
Grant us, O God, that we lie down in peace. Raise us up to life renewed. Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Ve'ha'amidenu Shomreinu Shomerenu L'chaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Ve'hamidenu Shomreinu Shomreinu L'chaim Ufrosanenu Ufrosanenu Sukat Shlomecha Ufrosanenu Ufrosanenu Sukat Shlomecha Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Ve'ha'amidenu Shomreinu Shomreinu L'chaim Shalom.
Would you join us now in chanting the Amidah, the Tefillah, Avot ve'Imahot?
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yadi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר, ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם, ועזרת Sarah.
Now a prayer for peace. Normally the Shalom Rav or Sim Shalom is a prayer for peace in our community, in our world. But this evening's Shalom Rav is a little different. It's asked for the gift, the blessing of peace in our hearts. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, eternal source of peace, and enable each of us to be a messenger to all those whose lives we touch. Bring peace to our minds and our hearts as we struggle through these difficult times. Help us all to count our blessings and find serenity, peace, and faith in your goodness. Let us hold fast to your assurance that you will always be with us and never forsake your creations. Help us to live by the light of faith with the confidence that better times do lie ahead. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
You may have noticed on your Jewish calendar that we have begun a new month in the Jewish year. It's the month of Av, and as Cantor likes to do every month, we welcome the new month, the Rosh Chodesh, with a prayer and a melody. Rosh Chodesh Av.
So we say bracha. יהי רצון שיתקדש עלינו, שיתקדש עלינו חודש אב לטובה ולברכה, לששון ולשמחה, לשלום והרחבה. רעות ואהבה, כן יהי רצון. So may this new month of Av, may this month of Av be a month for us of blessings of goodness, blessings of joy, peace and kindness, friendship and love. May this month of Av bring for each of us satisfaction and sustenance and continued strength of health and even a radiance, so that we may continue to grow and evolve and become our sweetest selves. Ken yehi ratzon, may it be so. Amen. Have a good new month.
Each week at this time we have the custom of expressing a prayer for those who are ill, our own dear ones and friends, and it seems more urgent with every passing day that we increase the intensity of our prayers as the number of those who are ill from the coronavirus seems to be spinning virtually out of control. And so we offer this prayer, Mi Sheberach.
Mi sheberach avoteinu mikor haberacha limoteinu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Amen. Misheberach imoteinu, mikor haberacha leavoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Once again, I wish you all a good Shabbat, good Shabbos, and hope that you're remaining in good health. Of late, I've been spending most of the time allotted for the sermon and remarks to dealing with the emergencies and crisis that our country is facing, so many other things that have preoccupied us. But it occurred to me, as I was planning my remarks for this week, that perhaps we would do well to spend a little less time commiserating and worrying about what is so obvious and important, and look at some aspects of our own faith, of our own history, that can teach us something new. I think that's one of the great features of Judaism, is that we're encouraged to, as it says in the Mishnah, attend the house of study daily. Well, perhaps we don't do that, but the instruction to learn something new every day, I think, remains as good advice. And so I thought tonight I would share with you some aspects of our Jewish tradition and history that not all of you may be aware of. We're coming up on a Jewish observance. I can't call it a holiday because it's a sad observance, and that is Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av. Some of you probably just know it as Tisha B'Av. And I doubt very much that any of our members observe it today, and perhaps a few of you may have observed it when you were much younger and maybe a part of a much more traditional congregation. But I wanted to discuss Tisha B'Av and actually why we should not observe it. And that may be surprising to you to come from a rabbi. I think that there are many aspects of Judaism to which Reform Jews, and I put that in quotation marks, would say, well, we don't do that because we're Reform. Actually, more often than not, they'll say because we're Reformed, which is incorrect, and that's a subject for another time. But it is true that many people who think of themselves as Reform Jews essentially are non-observant Jews or lax observant Jews. But the truth is that many of the things that we have chosen to do or not to do in Reform Judaism from its very inception and then being modified along the way have to do with specific objections to aspects of Jewish traditional observance that we simply don't agree with. Definitely this has to do with the area of biomedical ethics and also gender matters that we could discuss and will at another time. But let's talk specifically about Tisha B'Av. It is true that Reform Jews, Reform synagogues, do not observe Tisha B'Av. At least I don't know of any that do. And I think it's important to recognize why that is. Let's talk first about what is Tisha B'Av. The 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av is a very odd and historically unexplainable phenomenon. It is the anniversary of the destruction of the first temple, King Solomon's temple, which occurred in 586 BCE. That's what we prefer to call it, as opposed to BC. And this was the destruction by the Babylonians that resulted thereafter in the Babylonian exile. The second occurrence of Tisha B'Av, also tragic, was the destruction of the second temple, the temple that had been built by King Herod and was destroyed in the year 70, as most would call it AD, we call it CE, and that was by the Romans. And to this day, the temple has never been rebuilt. As an aside, there is a strong historical reminder of the destruction of the second temple by the Romans. If you've ever been to the city of Rome and have visited the area known as the Roman Forum, there is a huge monument called the Arch of Titus, which looks something like the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, except much smaller. And inside it is a carved frieze of Roman soldiers sacking the temple and carrying off such things as the golden menorah. And so therefore the destruction of the temple in the year 70 is actually carved in stone, if you will. But in addition, Tisha B'Av is said to be the date of the beginning of the destruction of European Jewish communities in the time of the Crusades. It is also the exact date when the Talmud was burned publicly in Paris. Tisha B'Av also marks the date of the deportation of the people of the Warsaw Ghetto who had still survived the onslaught of the Nazis, and that was the date in which they were deported to Treblinka. And a final matter of interest, you may know that at one time in our history there was a false Messiah who was widely accepted by the majority of the Jews of the world. His name was Shabbatai Tzvi, and there's a whole story about Shabbatai Tzvi that I'll be pleased to share with you at some future time. But Tisha B'Av was his birthday in 1626. And as a matter of fact, the followers of Shabbatai Tzvi turned Tisha B'Av from a day of mourning to a day of celebrating of Shabbatai Tzvi's birthday. All that, of course, ended when Shabbatai Tzvi actually converted to Islam when he was threatened with death if he didn't do that. But that's, as I said, a story for another time. So there are historical reasons why Tisha B'Av remains a day of sadness in the history of the Jewish people. but specifically it is observed among the Orthodox and more traditional Jews here and in Israel as the yahrzeit, if you will, of the first and second temples. And therein is the reason why in Reform Judaism we do not observe Tisha B'Av. Again, a little bit about the observance of Tisha B'Av in traditional Judaism. As all of you know, we have one major fast day in all branches of Judaism, and that is Yom Kippur. There is also a second fast day of significance, and that is Tisha B'Av. There are also about 4 others that are lesser fast days that I won't go into today. Let's talk now about what Judaism was during the time of the first and then the second temple. Actually, I'm not sure we can even call it Judaism. It was rather the practices of the Israelite, later Hebrew people that were in consonance with the observances of many other religions and cultures of ancient times, with the caveat, of course, that Judaism has always been monotheistic. But like religions of its day, much of the practices of religion were done not so much in the home, but rather in the temple. And when I say temple, I'm not referring to a synagogue. Rather, I'm talking to the ancient temple with its priests, Kohanim, and its Levites, Leviim, and an elaborate ritual of sacrifices that were offered at various times, including all the holidays, where the common people, the common folk, the Israelites, would bring their offerings, whether they be animals or they could be such things as grains like corn and wheat. And what would happen in the temple is, very simply, that the priests, assisted by the Levites, would offer these sacrifices, these burnt offerings, in ways that are very definitely and in detail described in the Torah. Jerusalem is high in the hills, and one literally ascended to get to Jerusalem, and also ascended the steps of the temple to enter within its confines where these sacrifices were carried out on their behalf by the Kohanim, assisted by the Leviim. I hesitate to call this Judaism because it really bears almost no resemblance to what we do in any branch of the Jewish religion to this day. As I certainly hope you understand, although not all other people do understand, Judaism, the Jewish people, have not practiced sacrifices of any kind since the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70. At the same time that the Second Temple existed, already Judaism had begun. It had branched out, if you will, under the leadership of the Pharisees, who morphed, if you will, into rabbis. We have never observed Tisha B'Av in that form in our Judaism, in Reform Judaism. And it is not because we just do less than traditional Jews, which is the common misunderstanding, but it's very much an intentional decision. Let me talk about what Tisha B'Av is really all about. It is about mourning the destruction of that ancient form of Judaism, again advisedly, that was observed 2,000 years ago and before. Similar in many ways to the practices of other religious and cultural groups, with the primary difference being that from the very beginning, the approach of the Jewish people was that of thinking of God as one universal God, monotheism, ethical monotheism, as opposed to multiple gods to which other people might well have offered their sacrifices. But the standard way in which Judaism was practiced was the ordinary Jewish people would bring their offerings to Jerusalem. And actually this was done mostly 3 times a year, but also other times as well. And this was called Aliyah, going up. First, because Jerusalem is high in the hills, and therefore physically one ascended the hills to get to Jerusalem. And in addition, the Temple Mount, as it's called, required steps to ascend to the area of the temple itself. We still use the term Aliyah today, of course, in 2 contexts. First, one makes Aliyah when one chooses to move to Israel and make their home there. And also, more commonly for us here in the U.S., one has an Aliyah to the Torah. One goes up to the Bima to recite the brachot, the blessings over the Torah. But in those days, Aliyah meant you brought your sacrifices to the priests and the Levites in the ancient temple. And as you observed, they would sacrifice these offerings, whether they be animals or whether they be produce. And what the average Jewish person would do would simply be a spectator to what the priests and the Levites were doing. Well, there are a few prominent reasons why we don't do this today. First of all, of course, the Jewish people have not practiced any form of sacrifices for 2,000 plus years, and as far as we're concerned, we never will again. Secondly, and I hope you're aware of this, we don't have priests and Levites in our form of Judaism. It's true that there are people that consider themselves Kohanim and Leviim, and in traditional circles they are the first and the second to be called for the Aliyah of the Torah. But in truth, our Judaism, Reform Judaism, has abandoned any distinction between Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim long ago. And Judaism is to this day very much a do-it-yourself religion. Yes, we have our rabbis and cantors who function as leaders and teachers, but we are definitely not priests, nor do we pretend to be. So both of these aspects of ancient Judaism are aspects that we have rejected and very intentionally rejected. But now I want to add a more important reason why we do not have any interest in Tisha B'Av in its current form. And I say current form because, and I'll come back to that later. And the reason is that were it not for the destruction specifically of the Second Temple, we actually wouldn't have a Jewish religion or Jewish people today. We would have been relegated to the dustbin a very long time ago, along with other ancient religions that practice their sacrifices. It happened during the days of the Second Temple that there was already a strong interest on the part of Jewish people, almost all of whom lived in the area of Palestine, or what is today Israel, and they wished to have Jewish experiences that were not dependent upon going to the ancient temple and were not dependent upon priests and Levites. And so essentially they invented the synagogue. And throughout the land of Israel and even beyond, they created structures that we can still see today in some cases as historical archaeological remains, wherein Judaism was practiced on a local level, where the Torah was studied, where education occurred, and for all we know, it may have acted even as a kind of a communal center for the Jewish people. There is one very famous such synagogue located at the shore of the Sea of Galilee, Lake Tiberias. It is called Capernaum, or in Hebrew, Kafar Nahum, and it definitely existed in the days of the Second Temple. In fact, it is considered a holy spot by Catholics because, although I realize this is anachronistic, it is said that this is where Jesus could have had his bar mitzvah. But more accurately, it is in the Galilee where Jesus lived and preached, and it's very possible that Capernaum, Kfar Nahum, was one of the places where he would have appeared. But getting back to the main point, were it not for the development of the synagogue, which, as I mentioned, developed side by side with the existence of the ancient temple, when that temple was destroyed in 70, that would have been the very end of the Jewish faith and people. A land that was no longer our own, dominated by the Romans, who imposed upon the Jews their own customs and religions, and of course without the ability to carry out the customary sacrifices and offerings on the holidays and holy days. That really would have been it. But thankfully, the synagogue had been invented, and what took place there, which was no longer sacrifices, but rather prayer, worship, study, ultimately took the place of ancient temple worship and became in time the synagogue that we would recognize today. Of course, different in many ways, but mostly no longer dependent upon a priesthood and increasingly emphasizing the importance of study and prayer. In fact, you may know that in traditional Judaism, there are 3 times daily for worship. There is Shacharit, the morning prayers, there is Mincha, the afternoon, and then Mariv, the evening. And in the days of the temple, these corresponded to the 3 times a day when sacrifices were offered by the Kohanim in the ancient temple. Now, to this day, in Orthodox congregations, and less so in others, there is Shacharit, the morning service, and then there's Mincha Mariv, a combination of the afternoon and evening service. And it goes on in synagogues, traditional synagogues everywhere. And those who are not able to go to the synagogue for whatever reason can offer their morning prayers on their own, wherever they may be. The bottom line in all this is that although we may hesitate to think of it as such, the destruction, especially of the Second Temple, marked the rebirth of our Jewish religion, or one might say the possibility of it remaining viable to this very day. Now, one might make the case that because we have had so many tragedies on Tisha B'Av, which I mentioned before, would it not be appropriate to have Tisha B'Av encompass also the Shoah, the Holocaust, which, after all, is the most tragic, the most devastating of all Jewish destructions? And I personally feel that would have been a good idea. And there are some synagogues that kind of blend Tisha B'Av with that today. However, I want to point out that Orthodoxy, specifically the Chief Rabbinate of Israel, rejected that proposal a long time ago, actually around the time of the founding of the state. And the reason for that was that they continue to believe that the destruction of the First and the Second Temples are the greatest tragedies in Jewish history, and that we continue to pray and hope for the rebuilding of that temple, not only the temple as such, but because it is said and believed by them that when the temple is rebuilt, that will be in Messianic times, when the Messiah shows up, and of course the world is transformed with peace and well-being. Now, I would not deny for a moment that Reform Judaism embraces the idea of a Messianic age. We too hope that someday that will come to pass. But long ago, our movement made the decision that we no longer believe in the concept of a almost miraculous human Messiah who, by simply showing up, by appearing, would announce the coming of the Messianic age, as if the Messiah himself, and I do say himself, was the one responsible for that. We continue to hope and pray for a Messianic age, but that is far different than praying for the rebuilding of the ancient temple, so that Messiah may arrive. But if you look at the Orthodox Siddur, or for the High Holy Days, the Machzor, there are many references to praying for the rebuilding of the ancient temple. And in fact, there are some extremists in Israel today who are of the opinion that the Temple Mount should be reoccupied by the Jewish people. If you don't know it, it is the site of the Mosque of Omar, a prominent visible site in Israel, and is considered to be under the domain of Islamic authorities. But there are extremists who believe that the Jewish people should reoccupy the Temple Mount, and that perhaps even that work should begin on the rebuilding of a third temple, an idea that we consider not only preposterous but actually truly dangerous. So I'd like to bring this conversation to a conclusion with this thought, that as much of a tragedy as the destruction of the two temples must have been for Jewish people of that time, one might say that in its ultimate manifestations, things worked out for the best. This is kind of a theme that I like to pursue. I even spoke about it last week when I used the expression Gamzo Latova. This also has a positive element to it. And that is that we owe to our ancient Judaism's enemies the survival of the Jewish people. We simply would not be here today were it not for the tragedies of Tisha B'Av. I do believe that we need much more intensive and important observances of the Shoah, which is now, and I believe always will be, a turning point in Jewish history, a tragic one, and also one that ultimately resulted in the rebirth of the state of Israel. I would be in favor, personally, of blending Tisha B'Av with the observance of the Shoah. But of course, I'm just one rabbi, and I don't seem to get a vote in this matter. I would have to say, however, that far more than Tisha B'Av, Yom HaShoah, which is the day officially designated as remembrance of the Holocaust, is one that must be and needs to be observed by Jewish people and Jewish communities everywhere in the world, as we do at Temple Beth El every year in the springtime for Yom HaShoah, where we kindle the 6 yellow candles, representing, of course, the 6 million, and we offer our prayers in memory of the millions that were lost in those horrible times. So that's a rather long lesson for today, but I thought we needed an infusion of Jewish knowledge along with the other concerns that I've been speaking with week after week. Again, Shabbat Shalom to all of you. Have a good week.
From our tradition, our rich Jewish music tradition, settings to just little bits of text, Elitzion and Al Hanerot Bavel. Elitzion is a talking to, a singing to the God of Zion, the God of Israel. And Al Hanerot Bavel is taken right from the book of Lamentations, Echa, and it is traditional to draw a little bit from Echa at this time. So a little teeny bit of the flavor of this, which, as I said, is traditional for us to hear in the month of Av. Alei galut misharetel mana meshiz imarecha ve'hod amal masher shvucha Al Nehawot Bavel, Al Nehawot Bavel, Sham Yashavnu Gam Bochinu, Misocherenu et Zion, Sham Yashavnu Gam Bochinu, Misocherenu et Zion, Al Hanerot, Al Hanerot, Nerot, Al Hanerot Bavel.
We turn now to the concluding portion of our service, and as we're about to recite the Kaddish together, these are the ortzites that we observe this Shabbat. Jeannie Shames remembers Annette Shames. David Morgan remembers Nanette E. Cohen. Linda and Craig Hoffman remember Molly Sampson. Sandy and Neil Clark remember Seymour Kleiman. And our Temple Bethel family remembers Rita Gore. And we also mark with sadness and with appreciation the long and incredible life of Member of Congress John Lewis, leader of the Civil Rights Movement, a historical figure by all accounts. And we also remember a colleague, Rabbi Robert Rothman. And in our memories, as well as in memory of all of our dear ones that we've lost in years gone by, we join together in the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, B'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei, B'chayechon u'yomechon, U'v'chayei d'chal Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'bizman kariv imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mivarach, Li'alam u'lamei almaya, Yiparach v'yishtabach v'to'ar v'tromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei d'kudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, huyaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and bring comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, Amen.
Shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imiru, Amen. Join together. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Amen. In tribute to the truly great John Lewis, civil rights activist, someone who walked the talk and inspired us all, how much we need that inspiration more and more and more these days, a little tune. It's a spiritual and then was drawn upon as one of the songs of the movement, the civil rights movement. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh yeah, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, shine, shine. All around the world, all around this world, we're gonna let it shine. Oh yeah, all around this world, yeah, we're gonna let it shine. All around this world, we're gonna let it shine, let it shine. All around the world, shine, let it shine, this little light of mine. Shabbat Shalom. Have a good Shabbos, a good week. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Shabbat morning service, blessings, brief blessings, and a lot of great Torah study on Zoom. Contact Rabbi Sternfield for the Zoom information. And we'll see you next Friday Shabbat, and especially on August 1st, a week from this Saturday, 5 p.m., a Zoom get-together for a little bit of making Havdalah together, conclusion of Shabbat, and a good shmooze, and oneg, a happy hour, a virtual happy hour. And that is August 1st, 5 p.m., and you'll continue to receive information and reminders about it from our wonderful president, Ron Eisman. And continue, please, when you can, to collect your cans of foods for the Manatee Food Bank. Put them in a bag, drop them at the front of the shul. On Wednesday mornings, they will be picked up and taken to the food bank. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.